Thank you for dropping in on this clip, which is a series of clips in which we get to explore and discover the natural wonders of the Sydney region. And here in the inner west of Sydney, we're at a park called Ewan Park. And why I've chosen this park for the start of this particular clip is that there are quite a number of rough bark gum trees here. And so given this clip is about rough bark gum trees, what is it we can look for when wanting to identify these trees? What actually is a rough bark gum tree? These gum trees are those trees in which the tree keeps its outer layer of bark each year. In our last video we looked at smooth bark gum trees, and with those trees the outer layer of bark is shed each year, leaving behind a relatively smooth and often brightly coloured texture and a pile of dead bark around the base of the tree. With rough barked gum trees, they keep this outer layer of bark, which forms a myriad of textures, colours and patterns. They can also have varying amounts of rough bark, with some trees having the rough bark over just the trunk of the tree, others the rough bark might extend up into the lower limbs, and for others it might extend right up to the smallest branches within the canopy. These characteristics of the bark will be one of the key features we'll be looking at as we identify rough bark gum trees, along with fruit, buds, flowers and leaves. As with our last video, we'll once again look at trees from each of the three groups of gum trees, being the eucalypts, the corypheas and the angophoras. The first group of gum trees we'll be looking at are the eucalypts. The first of these trees is the swamp mahogany, which is native to eastern Australia and, as the name suggests, grows in swampy or waterlogged soils. The bark of the swamp mahogany has a characteristic thick and spongy texture and is present right through to the smallest branches. It also has large leaves, the colour of which are what we call discolorous, meaning that the colour on the upper side of the leaf is different to that of the underside of the leaf, and it has this characteristic fruit. It's also one of the preferred food trees of the koala. And just some of the countries in which this particular tree has been planted include the following. As we walk along, here's another rough bark tree, and first thing we notice is that the bark is not that thick, spongy type bark that we saw in the last tree. So it's a different type of rough barked gum tree. And to help us identify this particular rough bark gum tree, we look up into the canopy and we notice these particular fruit. And these fruit are characteristic of a species called the tallow wood, which is generally found naturally in the northern part of the Sydney region and further north, but it has been planted throughout the Sydney region over the last number of decades. The ironbarks are a serious contender as having the toughest of the rough-barked gum trees. The name of the tree we'll be looking at gives us a hint, with the species name of Zidioxylon being a combination of the ancient Greek word zidos, meaning iron, and xylon, meaning wood. The timber of the ironbarks has been preferred structural timber in building for over 200 years and have been grown in other countries since the 1800s. The common name of Eucalyptus zidioxylon is the mugger ironbark, and as with other ironbarks, has a deep furrowed bark which is quite hard and exudes resin. Its colour is often a mix of dark grey to deep red. It flowers at times between mid-autumn to mid-spring, during which it provides nectar for honey production and a habitat for nectar-feeding birds and animals like the gliders. Our next tree, the Sydney peppermint, takes the honour of being the first recorded tree used by Europeans for its medicinal properties, with Denis Considine, surgeon of the First Fleet, credited with the discovery of the usefulness of eucalyptus oil. A sample of this he sent to Joseph Banks in 1788. Beyond its use by Europeans, the Sydney peppermint has been of extensive medicinal value to Aboriginal peoples, with the gum being collected and mixed with warm water and applied to sores, burns, fungal diseases, cuts and scabies, and was also an antiseptic that helps stop infection. The leaves were used as a very effective cure for diarrhoea, joint pain, and together with twigs were placed on a low fire in an enclosed space with the vapours inhaled to reduce the discomfort of fever and respiratory conditions. The rough bark of the peppermint is fibrous and stringy in appearance and often blackish around the lower part of the trunk. And this roughish bark extends to the lower branches of the tree. The next two gum trees have rough bark on the trunk of their trees, with the Sydney blue gum having it as what we call a stocking on the base of the tree, and the black butt having it up until the lower limbs. And the black butt's actually one of the most economically important gum trees in Australia, and quite possibly one of the more well known, given it's used quite extensively as flooring as well as structural timber. The species name for the black butt is Pilularis, Eucalyptus pilularis, and that pilularis is Latin for small pill, which refers to the shape of the fruit. The black butt and the Sydney blue gum form the signature species of the critically endangered blue gum high forest, of which there is only less than 5% left. Our next group of rough bark gum trees are the Corymphaeas. And these are those gum trees that have that urn-shaped fruit. The first of the Corymphaeas we'll be looking at is the yellow bloodwood, and it has this characteristic pale, flaky type of bark. And as we look up into the canopy, we'll see those urn-shaped fruits. The other bloodwood we call the red bloodwood, and it has a tighter, compact, tessellated type bark. It also has a more of a reddish colour under that bark. But again, looking up into the canopy, we'll see the characteristic urn-shaped fruit. The next group of rough bark gum trees we'll be looking at are the Angophoras. And from our previous clip on smooth gum trees, we know that the Angophoras have mature leaves which grow opposite each other and fruit which are ribbed. So we'll keep this in mind as we look and try and identify these particular trees. As you're walking up the road, we come across this particular small tree, and the bark is a grey, fibrous, flaky type, pale looking bark. And we look into the canopy of this tree and we notice that it has ribbed fruit. So it's a rough barked gum tree within the Angophora group. And this particular tree, what gives it away to the species is the sessile leaves. And what we mean by that is the leaves actually grow direct off the stem. This particular tree is the Angophora hispida, or the dwarf apple, and is again a tree similar to the tallow wood that has been planted around different streetscapes of Sydney.